So these are the objectives of this module. So by the end of this module, the learner should be able to first know the structure of the atom and its subatomic particles. Second is to identify the different elements of the living systems. Number three, differentiate ionic and covalent bonds. Number four, determine the structures of water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, gas, ammonia, macromolecules, and buffers, enzymes, and ATP, and what are the functions in the living organisms. Okay, number five is to compare the difference between acid and base, rather, diffusion and osmosis, active and passive transport. And then the last one is to explain the significance of numbers on the pH scale and how they identify if acidic or alkaline. So let's start my presentation with this. What are the examples of water? So if you notice with this picture, it's all about not only the living organisms, but also the non-living organisms. So like here, the person represents human, which one of the examples of living organisms, seen with the cat. So this is an animal. The glossus is a part of non-living organism or non-living matters. The butterfly is under the living, so on and so forth. So which means that everything uh, that we can see around us are examples of matter. I don't want to explain about the states of matter. Okay, so about the solid, liquid, gas, and then the plasma, and so on and so forth, about the phases. But matter is a start of an element. Okay, so matter, all the living organisms here, all the materials here are made up of an element. Okay, and there are essential elements which are found in your periodic table of the elements. So as we all knew, so this is the latest periodic table that I have seen, 115 elements, and some of these are considered as essential elements or essential. So that, what do you call that? The essential for humans, the elements. So the violet here are the essential elements which are necessarily inside our body. So what's the function of these essential elements inside our body? As I have mentioned earlier, it's about the zinc. The zinc is one of the component or one of the element that increases the immunity of our body, which means when you say immunity, it is about the immune system. Okay, it fights against infection and then so on and so forth. So this one is the calcium. But the calcium helps to make our bones healthy. Okay, about the hydrogen, sodium is necessarily inside our body, but in a minimal amount. How about when you say potassium? Potassium is one of the components that helps to contract our heart. That is the reason why if you are mababa ang potassium natin sa katawan, we cannot walk. Okay, because walking is good for the heart, which means that there is something happen inside our body. It helps to contract. It helps to contract everything in our body. Okay, that is the function of our potassium, which is necessarily to have inside our body. Okay, so let us first know about the content of your element. So your element is made up of nucleus. Okay, so this nucleus, okay, it is not about the cell that made up of Golgi apparatus, the organelles. But if you notice with your organization of life, on the last part is the atom, next before the molecule. Okay, so yung molecule and then next is an element, which means that an element is made up of a molecule and an atom. But let us go back with the element. Okay, your element is made up of an electron, neutron, and then the proton. The neutron and your proton is found inside the nucleus. So here is the nucleus. And inside the nucleus, there is a neutron and then your proton. Outside the nucleus known as the electron. So in your electron configuration, Diba? Have you, the word there na ginamit is electron configuration. It refers to the shell. Okay, so these are the shell, which is the inner shell, and then this one is the outer shell, the outermost shell. Okay, the electrons are found outside of the nucleus. So the neutron and then the proton found inside. Okay, if you recall with your previous lesson in chemistry, the number of electron and then the number of proton, same with the atomic number, which means that, for example, if the atomic number is 15, then the number of electron and proton are the same. Okay, magkakaiba lang ang neutron. That is the reason why magkakaiba ang atomic mass. Because atomic mass is equal to the number of atomic number, and then the number of neutron. Okay, so like for example, if the number of atomic number is 16 and then the number of neutron is 10, then the atomic mass is 26. Okay, so ganun yun makikita nyo yan. So here, okay, so this is the presentation of an element. So the symbol of this element is He, which is a helium. Okay, the atomic number is found at the upper portion of your element, and then at the lower portion of your element is the atomic mass. But sometimes, kung nakikita nyo the periodic table, ay magkakabaliktad, kaya magulo. You have to check that kung saan nila nilalagay ang atomic mass and then the atomic number. Okay, if this is the atomic mass is 4, narrowed off the teacher into a whole number, then the atomic number here is 2, which means the number of neutron here is 2. Because 4 minus 2 is equal to 2, which means that the number of neutron is 2. Okay. What's the difference between a molecule and a compound? Each element is made up of a molecule. And this element, if it is only one element, it is not cannot be considered as a compound, because when you say compound, it is compound made up of 2 or more elements. So for example, sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is a compound made up of sodium and chlorine. Okay, when you say molecule, it is an element. So like for example here, an atom of an oxygen or a molecule. Okay, but when you say compounds, which means it is not only about one element, but also 2 or more elements. So here, water made up of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Okay, so what are the forms of energy? There are different forms of energy, and this one is what you call the chemical energy. So chemical energy, either potential or kinetic energy. When you say potential energy, is a stored energy, and when you say kinetic energy, is into an action. So what's the difference? This inside our body. Okay, sabi niya, for example, the gasoline molecules are broken when the car releases an automobile engine. So pag non-living example, di ba? Ang gas ay nandun. Okay, nasa loob siya ng tangke. Okay, the release of the power of the car pag ang engine ay ginalaw. Okay, so from potential energy to a kinetic energy. That is the reason why ang sasakyan ay nag-move. How about with our daily activities? So we have stored energy in what part? The adipose tissue, the muscles. Why? Because di ba yung excess carbohydrates or glucose inside our body is converted into a stored energy, which is a glycogen. Diba yun yung naalala nyo sa inyong biochemistry? So na-convert siya into a stored energy. At itong stored energy ay mako-convert into kinetic energy if we move our body. So ano siya? Magsusweat tayo. Okay, lalabas ang ating taba sa katawan during our activities. So if you notice with the question in your pre-test, so ano ba pag hungry ka, ano ang unang gumagalaw? Syempre your stored or the stored energy or the glycogen. Kasi hindi naman kakain ka agad yun. That is the immediate response of your body is to gamitin yung stored energy. Okay, your glycogen bago ka kumain. Okay? Electrical energy, when you say electrical energy, refers to the movements of charged particles. So electricity, wirings. Okay, inside our body, we have our electric current to produce if the charged particles go within the cell membrane. So pag pumasok doon ang ating particles or the ions, the water, the molecules into our cell membrane, there are electric current na ginagamit. So malalaman nyo yan with the active and passive transport in the last part of this PowerPoint presentation. The nervous system uses an electrical current. So for example, as I have said, okay, na-touch ka ng isang crush mo, what will be the connection inside your body? Magre-react yun. Diba? Especially pag gusto mo yung isang lalaki or isang babae, there is a connection because of this electrical current. So the nerve impulses send information from one part of the body to your brain. Okay, kaya nga, you have to be careful. Third one is what you call the mechanical energy, which involves the moving matter. Okay, yung mga gumagalaw, like for example, the peristaltic movement in our during digestive process that is under the mechanical energy. When you are riding in a bicycle, your legs provide mechanical energy. So pag kumikilos ka, ginagamit mo yung pedal mo. Okay, that is what you call the mechanical energy. As the muscle in your legs are shortened, diba? You pinupull mo yun when you are moving, causing the limbs to move in order to pedal the bike. Okay, that is what you call the mechanical energy. Radiant energy, it refers to the form of visible wave known as the light energy. Like for example, the X-ray. Diba? Like for example, the to the echo. Diba? The ultrasound that is under the radiant energy. Okay. So let us now with your types of chemical bonds. In your objectives, dalawa lang ang ginamit, the ionic bond and then the covalent bond. So nung nakita ko kasi ito, with your previous lesson, I heard that you knew about the metallic bond. So we are focusing with the ionic bond and then the covalent bond. What's the difference between your ionic bond and then your covalent bond? When you say covalent bond, it's about the yung if there is someone who gives up and then there is someone who gains. So merong nagpaparaya at merong tumatanggap, 'di ba? So ibig sabihin noon sa isang relationship, hindi sila mag-grow or hindi sila magiging smooth ang kanilang samahan pag ang isa ay nagpaparaya, ang isa naman ay nagbibigay. Okay? So, like for example, pag ang lalaki ay galit, ang babae dapat ay control lang. Hindi niya sasabayan yung lalaki sa init ng ulo. Okay? So, there is someone na magbibigay at ang isa naman ay kukuha. So, it's about the losing electrons to non-metal atom, or this is about the losing electron and then the gaining of electrons. So aside from that, ang isa daw is a metal and then the other one is what you call the non-metal. So it is about the cation and then the anions. Okay? So here, as I have said, kasi ang iniisip ko nito is that sometimes kasi may lumalabas ito sa board exam. Okay? Sodium here is, there is a one atom at the outermost shell. Okay? If you check the atomic number of your sodium, while this one is at the merong isang electron na nalumabas dito. Then the chlorine ay meron siya 7 electrons. So it refers to the outermost shell of an element. Okay? So the first shell is made up of 2 electrons. The second shell ay meron siya 8 electrons. So that is equal to 10. And then, ang excess noon ay lalabas at the outermost shell. So ang sodium ay sobra siya ng isa, ang chlorine ay kulang siya ng isa. That is the reason why na magbibigay itong sodium sa chlorine para ma-made up or mabalanse ang number of electrons. So, ang mangyayari, ang chlorine ngayon ay magkakaroon ng 8 perasong electrons at the outermost shell. That is what you call the ionic bond. Ang isa tumatanggap, ang isa nagpaparaya. When you say covalent bond, so it is about sharing electrons. Walang nagpaparaya, walang nagbibigay. Didikit sila. Okay? Kung ang element na isa ay kulang ng, like here in water, there are two hydrogen ions and then one oxygen, rather, two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. So, ang inyong hydrogen ay meron siyang atomic number which is 1. So, kulang siya ng isa. Kasi kailangan, di ba, on the first shell is dalawa. Okay? Titingnan mo dito ang oxygen ay kulang siya ng dalawa para magiging A. Para maging stable, didikit ang hydrogen and then the oxygen. Didikit sila sa isa't isa. Ang mangyayari nun, mabubuo yung shell na kailangan ng hydrogen na dalawa. Okay? Then, ang inyong ang oxygen naman ay nangangailangan ng dalawang electrons, didikit yun sa oxygen para maging 8. Okay? You have to check that in the internet kung hindi naintindihan. Okay? What are the 4 main types of chemical reactions? Diba? The synthesis. Okay, the synthesis chemical reactions, kabaliktaran ng decomposition. Okay, synthesis is synthesizing. Diba? Breaking down is, synthesis is the building up. So two elements, two different elements. So for example, sodium plus chlorine is equal to sodium chloride. So that is synthesis. When you say decomposition is an opposite of your synthesis. So which means that baliktad, sodium chloride, pag decompose mo siya, it becomes sodium and chlorine. Magkahiwalay. But when you say single replacement, single means one. Okay, isa lang ang nare-replace. Okay, like for example, here in the example, this is a compound, AB. So example, this is a sodium chloride. And then the other one is carbon, another element, but it is not a compound. So ang mangyayari sa kanyang product, diba, these are the reactants at ito naman ang product. Pagdating dun sa during chemical reactions, diba, during heat process, okay, so ito ay nagkakaroon ng single replacement. So sodium chloride plus carbon ay magiging carbon chloride, then sodium. Ibig sabihin, on the last part, nagsolo ngayon ang sodium. How about when you say double replacement? Came from the word double. So like for example, sodium chloride and carbon oxide. So mag-exchange sila kasi parehong compounds. Okay, the sodium ay magdidikit sa oxide and then ang carbon ay didikit sa chloride. So there is a double replacement. Okay, here. What are the factors that influence the rate of chemical reactions? Okay, like for example, here, the temperature. Okay, kukuha ka ng 3-in-1 na coffee. Mas maganda kasi pag sa mainit na tubig mo siya ilalagay, mas mabilis ang ma-dissolve yung iyong solid particles or the solutes. Your solvent is, your universal solvent is water, the hot water. Pag nilagay mo yung solute doon, what happened? Mabilis ang kanyang reaction, madaling matunaw. Okay, that is one of the factors is the temperature. Pressure, if there is an increase, the closer the molecules for each other. The effect of this, they more likely collide and react. If the pressure decreases, the fewer the collisions, the slower the chemical reactions. So yung pressure, like for example, ang ating blood vessels, kasi this is under the human anatomy and physiology. Okay, pag nalikupan na yan ng taba, there is a pressure. Kaya nga tinatawag na high blood pressure. Mataas ang blood pressure. Ang flow ng blood ay mayroong pressure. Anong nangyayari? Nagkakaroon kasi ng problema doon. Nagkakaroon ng narrow or nagiging, ito yung blood vessels natin. Pag mataas ang blood pressure, there is a pressure in the transportation of the blood. Nagiging malapot siya, mabagal ang kanyang pagtakbo. That is what you call pressure. Okay, that affects chemical reaction. Catalyst. So, di ba yung inyong biochemistry sa inyong laboratory before, it's about the enzymes. Di ba napapansin nyo doon, yung nilaga yung patatas? Di ba nung nilaga ang patatas at saka yung isa nilagay sa cold water, isa naman sa tap water, ano nangyari doon? Nung nilaga ang patatas, hindi nyo lang maintindihan, but every living organisms, meron siyang enzymes. Okay, meron siyang enzymes. Ang enzyme nagsi-speed up, nagpapabilis ng chemical reaction. If you notice, sa nilagang patatas ay walang bubble formation, walang chemical reaction. Why? Kasi namatay yung enzymes. Hindi gumana ang enzymes. Why? Kasi nalaga siya. But if you notice with the tap water, mas mabilis at marami ang bubble formation. Why? Because of this catalyst. It speed up chemical reactions. Dahil walang temperature na nagamit doon in your experiment, what happened? There is a formation of the bubbles, and that is what you call the catalyst, or it speeds up chemical reactions. The main digestive enzymes which are present in our body para mabilis ang pagtunaw ng pagkain sa atin are the amylase. Diba? Made up of mouth and the pancreas, break down complex carbohydrates. Pag ang food, okay? Pag ang food ay introduce na sa atin sa ating tongue, okay? The salivary the salivary gland produces saliva, which is an enzyme known as salivary amylase. So hindi ba sabi ko noon pag may ASE sa dulo, enzymes ang tawag doon. Ano ang function ng amylase na yan? Speed up, nagpapabilis siya ng pagtunaw ng pagkain sa katawan natin. Especially here in our stomach, and even in our pancreas, the one that helps us to break down fats into a smaller particle, and that is what we call the lipase. Okay, the amylase is an enzyme used to break down complex carbohydrates. Naalala niyo yung ating lesson about the complex carbohydrates, matagal siyang matunaw. Okay, if you compare the starches, matagal siyang tunawin, i-compare mo doon sa simple carbohydrates. Okay, that is the reason why na pag kumain kayo ng complex carbohydrates, matagal kayong gutumin. I-compare mo dun sa simple carbohydrates. Because matagal siya talagang tunawin sa atin, and with the help of the salivary amylase, it helps to break down these complex carbohydrates into a smaller particle. The lipase is responsible to break down fats. The protease for the proteins. Okay, so that's the function of your catalysts. Speed up chemical reactions. So let us compare about the organic compounds and then the inorganic compounds. With your previous lesson about the general chemistry with organic chemistry, ang pinag-aralan nyo lang doon is about the organic compounds. How about when you say inorganic compounds? Okay, let us compare. The organic compound made up of carbon contains carbon, while your inorganic compound ay wala. Okay, but both of them are chemical compounds. So for example of your organic compounds are the nucleic acids. Have you remembered with the formula of the elements which are present in your nucleic acids, the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, CHO? But I have noticed that there are some. But kung papansinin mo the macromolecules are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Magkaiba lang yung ibang dugtong because your protein are made up also with nitrogen. Pero may lumalabas na ngayon na meron ding nitrogen ang iba. Okay, so hindi na natin yan palaliman. So that's the difference. How about when you say inorganic compounds, one of the example is the sodium chloride. So sodium and chlorine, wala siyang carbon content. So that's the difference between organic compounds and inorganic compounds. Okay, so this is an example of your nucleic acid. So kung titingnan mo, meron siyang carbon, hydrogen. So meron siyang carbon, hydrogen. Okay, how about when you say inorganic compounds? So wala siyang carbon content or walang carbon and hydrogen bonds. Okay. Okay, so in your module, I don't know na explain. Alam ko parang i-review nyo na lang yun. Okay, so you need to read about the organic and inorganic compounds. Acids and bases. Okay, so ang acids and bases, ano yon? The acids and bases, so this is the pH scale. So yung water, it is the neutral. Ang tubig natin ay neutral na sa kalagitnaan. Pag nag-increase, pataas ang number, yan ay under the basic or the alkaline. Pag pababa, yan ang acidic. Okay, so the examples here, the stomach acid, your hydrochloric acid, the gastric juice, which present in your stomach. So they are under the acids. Okay, how about your stomach tablets, yung antacid? Diba? Antacid means against acid. Nag-neutralize siya because it is basic. Pag ang acid ay lagyan mo ng basic, mag-neutralize. Diba? If the acid ay 3 kasi 'di ba before 7 ay acid. Kung acid content niya is 4 tapos ang stomach tablet is 10, i-plus mo yan. The 3 plus 10 is equal to 13 divided by 2. Okay? So 13 divided by 2, that is equal to 6.5, which means slightly acidic. Ganun yung kayo pag kayo ay sa laboratory. Okay? I will explain naman yan eh. Kasi pinag-aaralan ko pa kung paano ko siya ilusot. Okay? Nagtataka ako why these acids and bases ay kasama doon sa ionic inorganic compounds. According to Arrhenius theory, first define acids as compounds which ionize to produce hydrogen ions. Kasi ang acids and bases ay nagproduce ng hydrogen and then the hydroxide. So wala siyang carbon content. That is the reason why na ito ang acids and bases ay under the inorganic compounds. Okay, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so hindi ko na kasi naturo sa inyo about the Krebs cycle, pero talaga the glucose is breakdown into pyruvic acids. Okay, kung naituro ito sa inyo sa senior high school or in your biology, sa ating biochemistry, pero hindi ko na masyado. The ATP is a machinery of the cells. In order to the food that we eat is converted into another form of energy through chemical energy, diba? From potential to kinetic energy. So this ATP, which is made up of 3 means 3 phosphate, pag nag-move na, okay, it produce ADP. So nabawasan ng phosphate because from potential energy to kinetic energy. This is how important is your adenosine triphosphate. Okay? So this is the machinery of the cells in order to move or in order to form an energy. Okay. Movement of materials into and out of the cell. So kung naalala nyo, ang inyong cell ay meron siyang cell membrane. Naalala nyo ba yun? Yung aking turo noon. Ilalabas naman to ulit sa cell. Okay? Your cell is made up of hydrophobic and then hydrophilic heads. So ang nasa loob ay hydrophobic, which means kasi takot siya sa water because the inside of the cell and then the outside of the cell ay made up of water. So sa cell yan, makikita natin yan. Then ang nasa labas ay yung heads. Ito naman yung love nila ang water. That is the reason why sila yung naka-attach or so this is your cell membrane. Outside of your cell membrane may water kasi. Inside of your cell ay meron din water. Okay? So ito, ang tail na yan nasa loob kasi takot siya sa water. Ang water kasi ay nasa labas at nasa loob ng cell. So ang nakalabas ay yung heads, this one. Kasi ito sila ay water loving. So ibig sabihin kaya nilang ma-attach doon sa water. So ang movements of the movements of in and out of the cell ay pwedeng diffusion. Okay, when do you mean diffusion? The movements of the molecules from higher concentration to the lower concentration. So which means from a highly concentrated to a lower concentration of movements of gases. So ang diffusion ay ginagamit yan sa gas. Okay, for example here, when you are opening the perfume, napapansin nyo, nagsispread out yung kanyang amoy. So the movement is what we call diffusion. Okay? Osmosis. Ang osmosis naman, same with kanilang movement is from higher concentration into the lower concentration, but the movements of water. Kung diffusion, it's about gases. Sa osmosis naman, movements of water. So example here is about the red blood cell, kasi human anatomy and physiology. It is about the isotonic, the hypotonic, and then the hypertonic. Ang isotonic solution kasi another term for this is equal. Okay, when you say the hypotonic is that it is higher concentration of the red blood, the effect of this is swelling. Okay, it is one by one, it is when you say isotonic solution, the red blood cells is placed in a normal saline where the salt concentration inside the cell is equal to the salt concentration outside the cell. So, ibig sabihin noon, ang salt kasi it attracts water. Kung ano yung content ng salt outside of the cell and then the inside of the cell ay pareho. That is what you call isotonic solution. But if it is under the hypotonic solution, ano sabi niya? Is the higher concentration of the red blood cells outside, ito yung outside of the cell. Ano yun? Ang isotonic, ito yung outside ng cell, ito yung inside ng cell. Pag sinabing isotonic, ang outside of the cell and inside of the cell ay pareho. But pag sinabing hypotonic, the outside of the cell is highly concentrated and then ang nasa loob ay mas mababa or lower concentration. Mas mataas ang concentration nito. What happens? Dahil mataas ang concentration nito, it goes within the cell. What happened to the cell? Okay, what happened to the cell? It swells. Dahil papasok yung water. What happened? Ang red blood cells natin ay lulubo. Puputok yun. Okay? So kung hypotonic, mas concentrated yung nasa labas kay nasa loob. Opposite ng hypertonic. When you say hypertonic, ang nasa loob ay mas marami i-compare sa labas. What happened? Kasi ang highly concentrated ay lalabas. Okay? So lalabas ngayon ang yung ano tawag dito? Lalabas yung nasa loob, going outside of the cell. Okay, the water moves out of the cell. Okay, what happened? Magsishrink siya. Okay, ang cell ay magsishrink. Hindi siya lolobo. Malito yun siya, class. This is your cell. This is your outside, yung nasa labas ng aking hand. Ang nasa loob, ito yung inside of the cell. Pag isotonic, neutral, equal. Kung ano man ang concentration sa labas, ganun din ang concentration sa loob. They are equal. Pag sinabing hypotonic, mas higher or mas highly concentrated yung nasa labas. Okay? Na water. Ang nasa loob ay mahina. Ang mangyayari ngayon, kasi pag kung saan yung higher, siya yung papasok sa kung saang parte. Ang hyper ngayon, ang highly concentrated, papasok sa loob ng cell. What happened? Lolobo. Parang balloon. Pag binublow mo yung lobo, lolobo siya. That is, kaya pag magsiswell siya, lolobo siya dahil pumasok ngayon yung water inside of the cell. What if when you say hypotonic? When you say hypotonic, okay, your hypotonic is that, okay, wait lang sir. Okay, nag-ano kasi, ano na yung aking isang oras, okay? Kung highly concentrated to, lalabas siya ngayon. Kasi siya yung highly. Okay? Siya yung highly, lalabas siya ngayon. Iiwanan ngayon yung ang shell, ang cell. Ang mangyayari, magsishrink yung cell kasi lumabas yung water. So that's the difference between your isotonic, hypotonic, and your hypertonic. Tatandaan, pag hypotonic class, okay? Pag hypotonic is that mas highly concentrated yung outside. Okay? Pag hypotonic naman, mas highly concentrated yung inside. Okay? Active and passive transport. Ano yon? It is about the movements of into the cell and outside of the cell. So it is either active or passive transport. Okay, tumutunog na kasi within 5 minutes ay merong magbubukas yan. So this one is the pump. So they active, meaning it needs ATP to move. Machinery of the cells kasing ATPs. It needs this potential energy to a kinetic energy. Kailangan niyang kumilos. Okay, that is what you call the active transport. But when you say passive transport, there is no need para gumalaw. Okay, diffuse lang siya. Like for example, papasok lang siya na walang kahirap-kahirap. But when you say active transport, para siyang nagka-climb ka into a mountain. So active transport, you need an effort para makaakyat sa bundok. Pero pag sinabing passive transport is mabilis lang ang proseso. Pagbaba mo ng bundok, mas magaan compare sa pag-akyat mo ng bundok. So pag-akyat, active transport, you need an effort or you need an energy. When you say passive, bababa ka without the essence of an energy. Mas mabilis ang pagbaba. That's the difference between your active transport and your passive transport. Okay, so that is the end of your module 2.